Sitting is the new smoking. This is something that we've heard providers say for years. And when we say sitting is the new smoking, what we're saying, just as with smoking, we can look statistically at a person that has smoked however many packs over however many years and statistically ascribe a high likelihood that this person will end up with this morbidity and this mortality at these points in his or her life. The same can be said for sitting, in that looking at however many hours a day over however many years that you sit can be extrapolated into increased likelihood for any number of other issues of morbidity or mortality. Of the two, clearly, sitting is open to mitigation. The person that sits and the potential for subsequent morbidities can be mitigated by the correct self-care measures. I would liken the person that has to sit all day and the potential health disorders that he or she might face would be similar to the type 2 diabetic. The type 2 diabetic that doesn't care for their situation ends up with awful morbidity and mortality. The type 2 diabetic that manages themselves well actually rises to a level of health and wellness even above the average. And so there are disorders that managing them well for yourself, it can almost be a blessing that this came into your life because it forces you to become aware of where and what you are. I'm sitting here in this body. I'm going to spend my every last day in this body, and so will you. The body you're sitting there in is all you get. Keeping it well is a good idea. The average American sits for over 6 hours a day. That's not speaking to the person that has to sit all day at work. Probably doctors and physical medicine people everywhere have had opinions about sitting and have offered counsel in the matter. And we have some things that we think are important, and we're here to share them today. I will say that generally, by the time a person has been sitting long enough that it has become a problem for them, in most cases when we know we have a problem, we've got a sign or a symptom. Maybe we've noticed postural issues. We've noticed our body changing posturally. Perhaps we're having pain issues. In most cases, by the time you've been sitting long enough that it's started to affect you with either signs or symptoms, you probably need some help. We get people every day and for any number of complaints, and sitting is component to why they're here. We've been dealing with that for a very long time. And in many cases, these are people that aren't aware that sitting was part of the problem. In many cases, they are. And I will say that the advices we're about to try to share and the other advices you probably will find available are very good management tools, very good preventative procedures. But for most people, by the time sitting has affected you to a point where it's starting to bother you, you probably need some help. And having said that, I will say that the things we're going to try to share today are probably more use to the person who's either cared for themselves or has gotten cared for, has treated or taken measures to manage the muscular issues associated with pain. In our case, people that have been adjusted and treated and they've been improved, their problem has gotten better. This discussion about sitting becomes part really of the larger overarching discussion of staying adjusted. Staying adjusted equals staying well, equals staying functional. At the heart of the adjustment is motion. Normalized bearing, normalized posture doesn't exist without normalized motion. One of our first recommendations is that you not overcorrect or overarch as you're sitting. And this is exactly the behavior of a person who really needs to be adjusted. The person who can't straighten up, the person that isn't sitting straight when they're sitting, there's dysfunction in that person's frame. And with links in the chain not moving normally, trying to ask the rest of your chain to make up for that, you're just asking for more trouble. And so overarching, overcorrecting, it's almost never in your interest. Fresh Horses is a model for recognizing that when you're sitting, you're working. If you drive, if you're at a computer, When you're sitting, you are actually working. You are working, and the horses at work are your muscles. And the muscles you're asking to work are being asked to work in a very insidious way. It would be better for most of those muscles if you were digging a ditch. But because you're simply sitting still, you're asking a number of muscles to contract in an isometric manner. And this is a burden over time that can cause chronic disorders to beset the musculature. Fresh Horses speaks to recognizing what your muscles are being asked to do in a given sitting position, and then through your day, whatever your situation is, whether you're in an automobile, changing the position of the seat and the wheel and the angles of inclination to the extent your equipment allows you to, such that you're not in the very same position for a prolonged period of time, such that in different positions, with your work in front of you at different angles, if it's a keyboard or a mouse, a monitor that you can move around, if you have a sit-stand desk, the idea that you can shift the burden to different musculature of your body in different ways through the day, it's enormously useful in mitigating the detriment that prolonged sitting can become.